we have an interesting panel of experts from different organizations. So I believe we can start with you first, and we have a lot of inspiration stories from different parts of the world that, okay, how fintechs, mobile payments, digital financial services, which currently in Pakistan has a very promising future. We have some of the recent reports suggest that $36 billion has been marked as the kind of scale that this particular sector will generate in terms of creating 4 million jobs, contributing towards 7% of the GDP of Pakistan. What do you think that, yes, what can we learn and how can we implement some of this thing in the market, given that Pakistan is still has this challenging of improving financial inclusion for all?
I mean, I can give a start over here. So globally speaking, the infrastructure and what fintech looks like is it's simple, it's consistent, and it's trustworthy. And I think that's what's missing in Pakistan, right? Consistency in the sense of there's like a handful of vendors. I'll give an example of the US. Braintree, Chase, everyone who wants to set up e-commerce or fintech goes to one of these people and then has it set up. So across the board, it looks relatively consistent. And that is the first thing that encourages trust from the consumer's end, is you know that whatever you're giving out, it looks relatively the same across the board. And so you don't have a problem giving out that information. And then at the end of the day, if your credit card details or something like that is stolen, the bank will cover it. I've had my credit card details stolen when I was living in the States, and I didn't have to pay a penny of what was stolen. So that was another thing that I think fintechs over here also will need to adapt at the end of the day.
Raj, we've talked about, I think, great length in terms of what are some of the important stakeholders when it comes to this particular topic, consumer frictionless, facilitating the consumer frictionless journey. And we have suppliers, we have platforms, we have data, we have technology. But yes, now given your in-depth experience of being part of the leading fintech players, what would you like to contribute as to how important this particular segment is in terms of bringing that kind of inspiration from either the West or something homegrown in order to connect with these Gen Zs and millennials, because these are our actual customers going forward, and we need to really connect with them, as Habibullah rightly pointed out, that being part of those conversations, with other ecosystem players, with the regulatory, with the government partners, so that we can all work collaboratively in terms of making this actually reality. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so basically, I think fintech and the players that I represent here today, I think they've come in at a good time, because as an economy, as a financial economy, Pakistan's been pretty analog. So if you benchmark to what's happening in the West, I mean, they're already at payments 3.0, where they're talking about interoperability and remittances with like in a few taps, and we're still struggling with how to convert from cash to card. So you could look at this as a problem, but it's actually a tremendous opportunity. We have a certain segment that's already catered to with the help of our financial institutions and banks. And the regulators, like you mentioned, has actually become much more progressive now. There is light touch licensing, something that we are a direct beneficiary of. And what was missing here now was, and something that the fintechs are actually actively working on, is to build the right use cases for this segment that has to be unlocked. Your Gen Z, your late millennials, they have these certain use cases but not easy access. So it's important to build that product market fit, and ensure that you deliver the customer experience that they've requested. I mean, you could try to shove down your own egos and things that you expect are like great superior UX and let's put it out and it'll hit, but you can't. I mean, one important benchmark that I see, and it's done, Square, for example, is a leader internationally, and they also believe is creating a magical experience. So it's no longer MVP, it's a minimum magical experience. So see how you score in terms of, effort. So F for effort is the problem in Pakistan right now in terms of customer experience. We make the customer work very hard to achieve what he's trying to achieve. So simplify that, don't dumb it down, don't be patronizing, don't be condescending, but simplify it, and that's half the job done.
Thank you. Simplification is key. Definitely, I couldn't agree more. Before I just move on to Talha, just want to just remind everybody of you that the Slido app is still live. We are waiting for your comments and queries that you would like to ask. So please, please feel free to drop in your questions. We'll be just addressing them shortly. Talha, um, before I come to some other specifics, but given your in-depth expertise, are there some elements that you still feel that we are still not being able to tap in when it comes to servicing the different unserved and underserved markets? While yes, there is a lot of good work been doing, but there are still elements that maybe we are still missing out there. We are missing that big picture. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so just building up on what you just mentioned and what Raj also mentioned about building on the use cases. So as an industry, we have come a long way. Us as banks, we no longer see ourselves as a hindrance to such disruption. We have evolved as enablers now. So it's more to do with, so we have all sorts of products and services out there. You have tap and pay, you have cards, cardless transactions, cashless transactions, all sorts of services and products are already built. It's got more to do with building those use cases, and it just can't be a generic use case around it that I just like give you a product or service around it and you are gonna go and start using it. So any service, any product needs to be driven through a need. There needs to be a need and a solution to be built around it. Just to simplify it as well, just to give an example, I'm sorry about that. So just to give an example, when you're talking about customer experiences, I'm sorry, I just missed on the thought trail. But so you have all the products and services out there, you have all the features, but now it is time for collaborations and for the banks to be enabling all these fintechs and startups with all these services. So our job as banks is now more as an enabler than being there at the last mile and being there at the point of sale. So what we are doing right now is enabling the industry with all the right tools, with all the right products and services. And what happens is we are enabling all the fintech startups and even the blue chip companies so they can build onto their own use cases based on their own needs rather than it just being a generic product or service.
So I think if I understand you correctly, Talha, that it's about the same, again, if I were to apply the omni-channel approach, that okay, wherever the customer is originating their, let's say, banking or like payment journey, whether it's at office or whether it's at home, they should be able to continue where they left off if for any other reason that they were not able to complete that. But that journey should not just disconnect if they were to attend to any other thing.
So it's not just about the broken journeys, it's about more to do with what the customer wants. So you could have somebody sitting in a village and be requiring some sort of agri loan or some agri-tech solution. Yeah. So you're going to be targeting that customer very differently than how you're going to be targeting your customer sitting in Karachi or Lahore for that matter. So it needs to be, there needs to be an element of hyper-personalization coming in, which is already coming in through all the fintechs and the startup culture that we have going around Pakistan. But there is still a huge disconnect as to what the customer requires and what we are offering them. We are just like shoving down products and services down their throat, but it needs to be the other way around. So as to they need to be driven through a primal need as to what the customer actually requires, and we need to build our case into that. So the idea here is that as a bank, as a payment service provider, you got to be invisible, yet you got to be everywhere. So it's got to be so integrated, so seamless in the sense that the customer doesn't even realize that okay, so I'm crossing onto another platform. It's just like an underlying service which is already there.
And I think that just reminds me of another very important point in this particular discussion, that when you are looking for that kind of making that next purchase, okay, then there's also a question about digital lending as well, which is also gaining a lot of momentum. That okay, and I think right now there are very promising figures which are currently marked at nearly 20% globally, that how digital lending is the next talk of the town. That okay, if we talk about these Gen Zs and the millennials making their next purchase, so for them it's not just about convenience, it's also about when you're ensuring that, okay, how soon can I get that product? Because they really want to go and advocate that, okay, I got myself this particular device or gadget and everything. So the time to get something is also of critical importance as well. So Zai, just coming back to you, how will you now connect these dots that, okay, in terms of addressing the targetable audience, because of, as Talha and Raj mentioned about, but also at the same time, the lending requirements, the banking, the financing needs. How do you ensure that, are there enough channels right now already present in Pakistan, or is there still more need that we need to address these challenges in Pakistan going forward?
We do have quite a way to go, but also we're not as far behind as we think we are necessarily. I mean, just the example that I give is when I started, I keep giving the example of the US because I studied there, but when I started there, you couldn't do a bank transfer between people. You couldn't pay using your bank account. They tried it, it didn't work. Credit card penetration was high. Card penetration in Pakistan is low, so we've actually advanced by allowing the use of digital wallets and by banking or direct bank transfers, which is not something, the US is just catching up to that. They're just enabling that right now. So we're ahead there. What we are missing is Afterpay, KissPay, stuff like those sorts of integrations, which will then allow the consumer to then make those purchases on the spot. It does encourage impulse buying a little bit, but also then it allows people to then get ahead of your next paycheck, your next salary. Those are all going to be integrations that are going to be important and that will require collaboration across the board. And then again, making the experience, building off of what Talha said, is making the experience just as seamless as possible from start to finish. Because at the end of the day, if you then pause the customer to be like, अच्छा आपको बैंक से payment करनी है, तो आप इस account में जाके transfer करें. And that account belongs to an individual, not a business. That does not encourage trustworthiness. That's something that needs to be solved for. Those are sort of some of the aspects that will need to be solved for it.
Okay, so I think there are some interesting questions that have just come in from the audience. So I'll just take a minute. I think in the last 2 years, how has the government enabled the space and what kind of barriers? I think this is a very important question that, okay, when we talk about collaboration, so of course the public sector becomes even more critical as well. Any thoughts from you, Raj, Talha?
Yeah, so basically, like I said, in the last couple of years, the regulator has certainly become far more progressive, and we are very lucky. Like in the last 2 years, we've seen not only EMI regulations, but also we've seen digital banking regulations. Things do take time, but as someone who's worked across the board with different public sector regulators, let me tell you, the State Bank is very progressive. There are certain challenges that we do face regulatory, like in terms of the time it takes for certain things to process, and in terms of digital, obviously there's a little bit of, they're still being a little conservative. So like one challenge that we face as EMIs is the limits, because like especially like 2 lakhs is nothing with the dollar value fluctuating as much as it is. But the good part is that they're ready and open to listen and discuss with industry players. In 6 months, we've been speaking to them on how we can increase this, what more controls should be put, what more, what leeway do we need, what use cases, what the data is saying, and they're responsive to this and to amending regulations and opening those channels for you. Like for example, something that we're actively working with them on is cross-border remittances, which is something that's not allowed for EMIs. But now they're okay and happy to listen to these and make those amendments. So it's a good time to be in this space, in the fintech space with this regulator.
Okay. I just saw one question. I think it was one of my favorite questions as well when I was learning some of the ropes of this industry. And Talha, I'll come back to you for that question is that, okay, one gentleman or lady has asked that, okay, in terms of making digital payments, is smartphone a necessity or can feature phone can also do the same? Because I think this is a very important, because we, right now, I believe that we are among some of the brightest in Karachi. But I think if somebody's asking that question, that means that, yes, we need to clear it out. That, okay, is that a hindrance, or yes, it's not something true?
So when it comes to retail payments or any payment for that matter, the core idea or the basic purpose behind it needs to be frictionless, and that is also the theme of our conference today. So yes, to answer the question, yes, you could do it with the feature phone, but that would just add on to multiple steps to it. So one would rather be happier paying through cash because it's going to be much simpler. Whereas with the smartphone, with the technology and everything we have, it just needs to be like an unlock or like a face unlock, and then your payment just just go through. So the core purpose here needs to be that we need to remove any additional steps, any sort of friction that is out there in order for any use case to be successful. So yes, essentially you could do it, but wouldn't be adding any value.
Yeah, and I think I'll just like to add on to that because it's all about understanding the customer. That okay, who your customer is. That if your customer is, let's say, somebody from far-flung rural areas who has never been exposed to any kind of digital payments, advances in technology, then you need to provide them with that initial handholding, even if it requires multiple steps. But when it comes to having those conversations with the Gen Zs and the millennials who are radically exposed with new platforms and everything, so then over there you need to ensure that the time to shop something should be as minimal as possible. So I'm mindful of the time as well, so just one last round. What is the fintech looking to you in Pakistan, Zair? Just a couple of thoughts on that.
A couple of thoughts. It's definitely advancing, and I love how well we're advancing. I think, like I talked about before, integrations are going to be something that's required across the board, and making it more consistent. Just period. The other thing is that fintech is here to stay. Digital payments are here to stay. And one struggle I think that Pakistan is still facing is that anytime you try and pay with a card, it costs you 3% extra. A bank transfer kare, you have an extra fee attached to it. Those need to be built into overheads and built into costs for every retailer across the board. And it's going to take time, but that's something that the industry starts need to taking a step towards, because globally cash on delivery is not an option. And we use it for about 80% of our transactions. So that's a shift that needs to take place in the mindset globally and moving forward.
Thank you. Raj?
That kind of leads beautifully to what I was going to say. I feel 100% fintech's here to stay. It might sound like a buzzword, but if you look at what's happening across the world, it is the way of life now. It's going to become as mindless and as simple as this is going to become like one of your hygiene factors, that things you do and move on. It is going to be the age of the platforms. So as Talha said that, you have to pay a 3% or you have to pay a banking fee. I think being what Pakistan lacks and what we're seeing internationally in terms of look at Revolut, look at Square, look at Venmo, PayPal, is having a platform that caters to both sides of the market. So not only are you able to cater to a larger audience, but also you're able to absorb those charges because those are all on the platform. So a little bit more of integrations towards becoming a common platform. Maybe not so many players, less players, but more towards becoming a platform is what we are going to see in Pakistan in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed about Pakistan is that we go from proper brick and mortar and jump directly onto digital. So one thing that we need to focus on, and like Habibai already mentioned as well, so we need to look at the cultural norms here as well. So there are hybrid solutions out there, like as I just mentioned, about 80 to 90% of our online orders are based on cash on delivery. So we have solutions out there which are like a midway, so you could maybe have like a QR on your bill or something on those lines, and then you can make that payment digitally, because we like to see the product right in front of us when you're making that payment. So there are hybrid variants where your phygital is the right word for it.
No, thank you so much. I think, just to summarize the discussion so far, so, just what Talha just mentioned, I would like to echo that there is no one shortcut. And just saying that, okay, technology will save, what you say, will solve everything, I think that's an overstatement. You need to understand, okay, exactly where are we standing, what our customer needs. So it's one step at a time, but at the same time, making that step in the right direction. I'm glad that, okay, although my colleagues over here, they're representing great institutions, they're doing some fantastic work, but at the same time, they are also realizing that, yes, there are some opportunities to learn from one another and collaborate collectively. Not in terms of that, okay, you're doing something, that we should not be doing that. It's not about that. It's about collaborating, learning from things that did not work well for somebody else, but capitalizing, because at the end of the day, we mean well for the country and the nation to prosper, because there is a lot of room for Pakistan to basically benefit from technology, the different platforms that we are introducing, and at the same time, digital financial services, which is growing growing quite exponentially, whether it's e-commerce or any other particular discipline. So I think, thank you so much. Before I conclude, there are a lot of exciting questions that I'm currently leading, but just in the interest of time, I would welcome all of you to connect with each one of us during the lunch break. We're all here because I think there are some good questions that need to be addressed and cleared out. So thank you once again for your time. Ali, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And with that, yeah, I would request Mr. Wasil Amjad, CEO of EXT, please come and present mementos to our respectable panelists.